Good. All right. Well, so the next section here, he's going to briefly go over the various ethical systems that he wants us to deal with. And he says that when ideas are designated as systems or paradigms, right, or other, or another synonym, we inevitably create distortions. Thus, he says that he admits to a certain degree of necessary misrepresentation in the categorization within this book. So, what's he suggesting here? Well, if you say this is this, and this category is this, and this category is this, well, that's kind of you're gonna say, well, wait a minute, no, I don't agree with that. Some people are gonna say, no, I'm not in there, I'm in here, and you put me over there. So there's some, obviously, you can't clearly cut up the cake as you would ethically or any other way, by the way, without having some distortions. And so that's all he's trying to get at here. He says, first, this process will often join under one heading thinkers who will differ sharply at important junctures. So I thought he was here. Well, you put him over here, right? Okay, well, that's part of the deal, right? That's going to happen, is what he says. Secondly, just as reality is often too messy to keep everything in its designated compartments, ideas from one system often overlap in significant ways with other systems, right? So there's going to be, this is one system, this is another system, but, there may be some overlaps with regard to the systems. Okay, so that's just part of what happens when you try to separate these various categories. And so he says, as a result, we admit that those familiar with the field will be justified in questioning whether specific groups and individuals have been properly identified. So basically what he's saying is, here's my attempt to kind of put these various groups, systems, individuals into various categories. And yeah, everybody won't agree with it. And he understands that that's just the way that things works. But here's his kind of shot at doing that. That's what he's thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, anytime you try to classify something, then the platypus comes through and says, listen, I'm a mammal, but I also lay eggs and all these things. So, yes, we had this discussion, too, with even some of the people that are authors from our last book put people in. And so, there are jumping off points that you say, oh, I think this person should be on our camp. And, oh, I can't believe you stuck me at the same table with this person. So it's going to happen. Let's just roll with it and get further down the line. So that way we're not having too individualistic of categories here. All right. Well, three of our systems that we're going to be discussing here, the divine command theory, virtue ethics, and natural law, have been and remain viable options within Christian ethics for centuries. Excluding any of them would be almost unthinkable. They're going to have to be discussed because they're kind of the main ones. And what is being called here as prophetic ethics is not unlike the other three, a conventional or easy identifiable label. Indeed, it includes groups not necessarily thought to be natural bedfellows. Nevertheless, we find it necessary addition to the book, since it represents an ethical perspective that clearly does not fit within the other three models and exhibits enough from the family resemblance to justify a single heading of encompassing the diverse groups represented within it. So you can kind of think of this, if you were there for our last book, this is kind of the fetus position. Not a lot of people hold to it, but also you can't just dismiss it. And I would think as we continue on with this book, you're going to hear a lot of familiar talking points that you may come up with in your day-to-day life. And so I think that'll be interesting and shouldn't be a item to just dismiss right away is, oh, well, it wasn't there in the beginning. And so, it doesn't have the long track record. Well, it seems to have a pretty prominent place in certain areas when the topic arises. So we can't discount it.
Yeah. All right. So he's going to talk about the main three, what he calls the main three: divine command theory, virtue ethics, and natural law theories. And then he's adding this, what he calls prophetic ethics, to his list. And so we'll kind of, which is different than the others. It's not the traditional type of thing that we usually consider when we're talking about ethics. So we'll have to wait to kind of see how he deals with that, explains that, defines that, that sort of thing. He says, and finally, by focusing attention on Christian ethics, right, we have omitted paradigms that he says are commonly found in surveys of ethical theory. For example, utilitarianism, which is a consequentialist type of ethics.
Mm-hmm.
It's a major force in contemporary ethics, but lacks a large following among Christian ethicists. And so by limiting our scope, he tells us, to Christian ethics, we will ignore many ethical models that have a significant number of advocates today. So he's just trying to narrow us down so that, he's not all over the place and trying to cover everything. And so, utilitarianism, that kind of stuff won't be part of this. He's just going to deal with these four that you just listed there. The divine command theory, virtue ethics, natural law ethics, and what he calls prophetic ethics.
Yeah. Yeah. And reading other books like these, four, I think, is a really good number, especially for keeping the ideas, especially different ideas that you might not interact with on a daily basis, kind of in your head, and being able to, within the scope of even the responses, go, person B made a good point against person A, and now person C is making a good point that I think fits along with person B. And, those two come from different, streams. And so, those are good to be able to kind of not mix up when you get too many people writing against a particular topic. Well, and then the remainder of this chapter will focus on three main tasks for each of the ethical theories. First, a brief overview will provide some of the salient characteristics of each theory, and this will be followed by a glimpse of a historical development in each of the ethical paradigms. And then finally, since attention will be focused on Christian iterations of these theories. Each section will end with scriptural passages that are commonly cited as supportive of each ethical approach. And so, chapter 1 is not this a big long thing that will take you forever to kind of get in the meat and the potatoes of the argumentation. But I think it does a good job of servicing exactly what you need it to. Define terms, understand its prospective in history, kind of what came before it, what came after it, and then both the Old and the New Testament approaches, or maybe no Old Testament and more New Testament, or vice versa. So
right.
It does a good job.
And in the interest of not being so unwieldy with this book, the historical developments will be really short. So you need to get the book, because there's more stuff that he's going to talk about in the historical development of each of these particular positions. But we're going to keep that relatively short so that we can continue to move quickly through the book or through this chapter.